Thank you all for coming, and appreciate it. We are very fortunate to have with us today Paul Green, the Executive Director of the PDA, to give us an overview. As we all know, he doesn't have all the facts and doesn't have all the information, but we'll get an overview of what is going on in the area. We also have with us today Peggy Lamson, who's a town representative to the PDA, and we also have Susan Parker, who represents Newington and Greenland as the director of the PDA. And
This is Susan. I'm here. She's here.
Susan's been appointed about a year ago for the joint meeting between the selectmen of Newington and Greenland to, she took the place of Peter Laughlin, who represented Portsmouth and Newington. The legislature changed the format, so it's Greenland and Newington now has a half a rep each. And Ms. Lamson is the representative of Newington. I'll turn this over to, this is our new selectman here. I'm sorry, Brandon. Brandon asked about, but this is his first meeting, so be kind. And Bob Lonigan, our other selectman, we're the two selectmen in town. My name is Ted Conn. Paul, you're on.
Okay, Paul Green for the record, Executive Director of Pease Development Authority. And I was asked by Director Lamson, Director Parker, and Selectman Connors to provide you with an update on potential development at the Pease Airport. What I can say to you is, what I would like to do first is read you a report, a memo that I was going to report on Thursday, this coming Thursday, at our PDA board meeting. If that's appropriate, I'll just read this memo to you, and then we'll go from there. Essentially, at the January 20th, 22 meeting of the PDA Board of Directors, the board authorized the entry into option agreements regarding the leasing of land for 2 potential air cargo developments. As referenced in that meeting, option agreements were a preliminary step in these possible projects. While developers noted development scenarios for each location when requesting the options, no specific development proposals have been presented to the board for approval at this time. Following the January 20th meeting, the parties finalized the option agreements effective February 1st, 2022. Additionally, the developers' engineers, a firm called Ty and Bond, a local entity, commenced a traffic study. Right now, VHB will be reviewing that traffic study when it's completed. In addition to the traffic study, the developers have informed me that they are currently working with their consultants and engineers on survey, noise, environmental aspects of these projects. While the developers are working on the plans to present to the board during public meetings for one or both locations, in hopes such presentations may be this spring, they do not have a specific timetable for submittal at this time. I will continue to keep my board and the public abreast. I think it's important to realize that development at Pease usually starts up with a conceptual presentation to our board for approval. Usually the discussions in a project that we have proposed in front of us would be at the staff level. PDA staff, PDA council felt that this potentially was at a magnitude that we wanted to be public with the process, and we first brought this to our airport committee. And essentially what we've done is we've provided an option for this entity to have exclusivity on the property so that they can do their due diligence. We have not proposed a lease agreement, we have not proposed any conceptual approval. We've simply given them the option to do geo-survey, engineering, permitting, design, research, to see if this is a viable spot. I can tell you at this point that the developer will agree that through their due diligence, they've already recognized that this project is probably ultimately going to be a lot smaller than what they originally put in their first proposal to the airport committee. I think you'll also find that potential development for many reasons is somewhat limited due to the airfield infrastructure at Pease. There's been some op-eds out in the media that I simply, in my professional opinion, completely disagree with. We could not host that type of activity that's been put out in op-eds. It simply won't come because of the airfield infrastructure, the ramp and apron space that's there. I do think that the airport could host a very thoughtful, right-sized aeronautical development that fits at Portsmouth. In my opinion, I don't see this being a large cargo hub that has been called in drawing operations. I think one op-ed out there put it at 3,000 operations a year. It just will not happen at Pease. We can't support that for several reasons, and I could get into that in greater detail if need be. But what I would like to articulate today is that this is the start of a proposal process. Everything will be in a public meeting with public input, and we simply haven't seen what ultimately this project looks like at this point. We've simply approved this entity to have an exclusive option on the land that they're interested in that allows them to spend the money on what we know the PDA board and the community would want to see as far as doing due diligence for this type of proposal.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions by the selectmen or anybody have questions they'd like to ask? No parameters, yes.
One quick question. You use the word that you assisting development, that there's two ways I can look at your statement.
Would you
that
please
just
stand
made.
up so everybody can hear you?
Sure. Jim Weiner, 397 Fox Point Road. The question I have is development. There's two forms of development of what I just heard you perceive. One could be cargo. One could be a company like Lockheed Martin takes over the two facilities, they bring in a plane, they retrofit it, upgrade it, send it out. That's another form of what you, because you alluded to, it could go either way. Is it cargo, or is it a major corporation looking to do electronic refit of planes, of military, of whatever it may be?
I have nothing to present you. It would be speculative at this point for me to say that. I do know that the development team is looking at a variety of aviation aeronautical uses. FAA policy requires that this particular land area be used for aeronautical use. So they're obviously trying to get an aeronautical entity in there, but I don't know what the end use would be at this time.
Any other questions?
And I would like to add that end use would be put before the PDA Board of Directors as part of a conceptual presentation.
Follow the plan. Anything that's presented, the PDA board will approve. I mean, they'll rule on it. It'll be.
Yes, this would all be put before the PDA Board, most likely. It would, I think, in a proposal that could have an impact such as the square footage that we're identifying, I think it would be put as a general proposal first with no action, allow the PDA to do their due diligence and make a decision, but this is not something that the PDA will act quickly on. We'll make sure that we have a very well proposed proposal that we can clearly identify what the intent is before any decision was made I don't like to speak for my board, but I'm pretty confident that my board would want to see what this ultimately comes to at the end.
Yes.
And I will reiterate to Paul, and they know, and my colleagues on the board know, that I was very emphatic the day that Procon came to speak to the, enchilada here, that we do not need a Logan North. Paul knows I said that, and I said it over and over, because the residents of the town of Newington, when the United States Air Force closed, you remember, shut the doors, what did the town say? We don't want a Logan North, and I've been very emphatic about it. Paul knows I have, and my colleagues know that, and the north ramp is my baby. It abuts the oldest town forest in the United States.
I haven't met you, Mr. Green, but I sense I'll be meeting you. My name's Malcolm McNeil. I've represented the town of Newington for a number of years relative to conversion of the base to civilian use. I have a number of questions. I know what stage of the development process you're in. I have had projects at Pease, but they've all been on the land side, so I'm familiar with that process. But I distinguish that from the process that is going to go forward with regard to this use. And I think you know from what you've been reading in the newspaper, et cetera, that many of the concerns relate to capacity, noise, footprints, and things of that nature. So I'm going to ask you a few questions in that regard. Okay. Could you tell me what percentage of the existing air traffic at Pease operates between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.?
I would estimate that it's probably about 2%.
And from your investigations so far, has it appeared that cargo primarily operates at night?
No, sir, not if it's cargo that I think would fit into the Pease operating model.
Well,
And what I mean by that is most cargo that operates at night is a priority going to a sort complex similar to Memphis, Tennessee with FedEx. We just do not have the infrastructure that would support that kind of model, that wouldn't allow for a hub distribution system. We don't have the ramp and apron space. We don't have the fuel capacity, and it probably just wouldn't logistically make sense that 3/4 of our airport is we drew a 360-degree circle around our airport, that the majority of that is ocean. They like to be land-based, centrally based, so in my opinion, no, I don't think that model works at Pease.
How much cargo goes through Pease now?
Most of our cargo right now is what we call ad hoc, which is usually large cargoes that's taking up an entire aircraft, and it's usually something that needs a specialized piece of equipment to move that. For instance, a Raytheon Patriot missile battery, a printing press, something that utilizes one aircraft to move out. But I would put our cargo operations at about 10 operations a month right now, and the majority of that is usually transient cargo that is doing a customs clearance or a fuel technical stop at Portsmouth, not end of the run type of cargo.
Are all of the aircraft that bring cargo to Pease Stage 4 aircraft?
Currently, yes, so our primary candidate is National Air is Stage 4 aircraft.
And do you impose any restrictions on their operations?
So FAA policy won't allow me to restrict. What we do and we currently do with our Part 161 noise program is we run a voluntary noise restriction program that we ask any air carrier to reduce their activity overnight.
And do you enforce that?
Right now, we do not have the activity that we've had to address it.
Okay, would you intend to enforce it with this cargo use?
Absolutely.
In your opinion, how many planes can fit geographically on the proposed areas?
To be clear, there's two proposed areas. One is on the North Apron, which ultimately, when you actually do the design build in the taxiway egress for a wide body aircraft to that building, there's not a lot of ramp and apron. And I think in my opinion, you could stage probably two aircraft, to support that building. The New Hampshire National Guard has a footprint out there that we need to be conscious of. And, you would be limited, in my opinion, to 2 wide body aircraft, if that. And at the hangar 227, which is the other proposed area, which is midfield, you would also be limited with the amount of aircraft that could be staged there. And one thing that's important to note is currently we handle operations there for transient military, for corporate, for charter, commercial air service in that same envelope. And whether we take on cargo in the future, something will have to give, because this is space that's currently being utilized by existing aircraft. So at some point, we may replace the type of operation, but we only have so much square footage where aircraft can actually park. Something will have to give if we take on new business.
Right. And you're in the process of negotiating a lease with the developers. Is that lease assignable?
We are not in the process of negotiating a lease right now. We've simply approved an option agreement for them to geo-survey and due diligence and regional impact studies on those.
Okay, well, they can make a choice to come back and engage in the process, correct?
Yes, that would need PDA board.
Do you have any knowledge as to whether FedEx, Amazon, or UPS are part of this project?
I do not. I know we have a list. The developer has identified that there's a potential of, I believe it's about 35 different parties that they are looking at.
Do those users that I just mentioned use the airfield now?
They do not.
Do you believe that the Part 150 and Part 161 will need to be updated in your consideration of their application if it comes forward?
In my opinion, right now, it would not need to be triggered for an update. However, it is a working document. We continuously monitor that, but this would not be a triggering device simply because we build an air cargo facility. And we've seen great strides in the fact that our noise contours have actually been reduced as we've gone away from stage 2 aircraft in the past military days to now operate stage 4.
I remember that. In terms of the process, will the application be reviewed by the Airport Compatibility Committee as it goes through the process?
That's normally not part of our development process. That is specifically to deal with, that group is specifically to deal with noise inquiries and noise concerns that are on hand. At this point, I don't know how we correlate potential future issues in a group that's designed to address actual noise concerns that are happening now.
What do you perceive to be the role of the FAA as to these projects?
I think the FAA would require that the airport sponsor continues to adhere to our FAA grant assurances and federal obligations as far as making sure that if there's an aeronautical entity that wants to come to a federally funded airport, that we are doing everything in our interest to make sure that we're abiding by and answering their request.
Do they have to approve the lease?
The FAA does not have to approve the lease. If there's ramifications if we leased it and they did an investigation and it wasn't up to par. They would review that, but they don't have to approve the lease.
I don't want to take up all the time here. I didn't fully introduce myself. My name is Malcolm McNeil. I don't live in Newington, although when I was representing you, I thought I did. I live on 44 Colony Cove Road in Durham, just off the end of the runway. So I'm an affected party, and that's why I'm here. I am an attorney. I'm retired, although my license is still in effect. And I'm here representing myself. I'm not here representing Newington or any third parties. Thank you for your answer.
Mr. Weaver?
First, Malcolm McNeil, everything I've heard in terms of everything that you've done for this town of Newington has been wonderful. What you said today was about 3/4 of the questions I had was not going to ask, but I'm going to follow up with 2 questions that you asked that were beautiful. What was asked was only a half answered on one of the questions. On the North Apron, you said you could stage 2 planes. So,
In my opinion, you could stage 2
No.
planes. Again, building hasn't been cited or designed. There's obviously wingspan setbacks, but in my opinion, I think it would be a stretch to get anything more than 2 wide-body aircraft on the North 40 after you have your taxiway egress and your potential building built.
so one further question on that. It stated that they're going to build new hangars, and the new hangars, are you basing your statement on the land available for them to build the new hangars on? Or can the hangars be built 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the size based on the land that you've talked about on North Apron and then 227?
In general, there's an option agreement on the North 40 apron. The proposal, which was not a conceptual proposal, was basically presented to our airport committee that they would like to enter an option agreement so that they can do geo survey and site design work. At the time, I believe that they put a square footage of that building that was 300,000 plus square feet, and my staff identified that it's very unlikely that a building that size could fit there. I think through discussions that number has now come down to about 200,000 square feet. I still think, in my opinion, that is a stretch to fit on that North Apron. But based on that 200,000 square foot building, and with all the infrastructure that it takes to support a building like that, in my opinion, I don't see how you can get more than 2 wide-body aircraft staging at that building and be able to taxi in and out.
So the only risk to your statement is that their geo-surveying may allow them to actually build a bigger hangar. But you're saying from your knowledge of that particular parcel, you don't believe that they could do that. That's what I'm trying to read into this.
In my opinion, yes.
Is the land, and could the land support multiple sizes of what is currently proposed? Is my question. Forget, I know they went 3,000 to 2,000. I'm trying to understand, is there the option where they can come back with a 10,000? Or a 100, or 400,000, 500,000?
Absolutely, they could.
That's why I want the audience to understand. The question is that I'm hearing they went from 4 to 3, which is what they, and you don't, none of this is absolute. They're doing a geo-survey. The geo-survey could open up a much larger potential, which means the 2 staging planes could become X number. That's all I'm trying to get at. And then the second question is, thank you for that answer and the information. On the 227, you didn't give a number of planes. You skipped Malcolm's question. So I'd like you to, if you could, address your best guess.
It would be speculative.
That's all I need. That's perfect.
Currently, we have approximately a 200,000 square foot existing hangar in that footprint. And currently, we sometimes stage upwards of 4 aircraft in that area, 4 wide-body aircraft are in that area to support transient military activity and charter activity right now.
Okay, so that the North Apron can only stage 2, 227 to stage 4 is based on their staging area. That is what it is. And then the only other thing is, you made a statement that the noise, this is going back to the process. The process, you have a committee, and I didn't get the name when Mr. McNeil actually made it, but you referred to the FAA when we were talking about it, and their ability to judge noise. And you said, well, we can't do that. You then said there's 35 different parties that are potentially interested. He asked for the exclusion. Did you look at FedEx, UPS, Amazon? I thought your answer was no on those, but I didn't.
My answer was the developer has provided information to the PDA, and I believe this was in our public board meeting in January, that they have a list of 35 entities that they're looking to try to attract to.
Wonderful. So then the last statement I have is, you have a group that can evaluate sound. Sound is generated by a fleet of planes. Each of these 35 have potential, they're interested, they're talking with. I'm sure that the developer, Procom or whoever it is, whoever's doing the development is talking to these 35. Is there any reason why they cannot provide a list of planes that would be utilizing it so that the committee can evaluate the noise allow the PDA to be a lot more educated about what's coming at them, if this is a process issue we're going through.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be the process, the community noise group wouldn't be tasked with that. But what we have asked the development team is when they do identify the end use,
Thank you.
that they will be providing that information to the PDA board.
So the end use meaning the planes that will be coming in and out, the types, the styles, the size, et cetera.
Correct, which, again, is somewhat speculative, because in the aviation business, you could sign a signatory deal with an operator, but you don't always know what capacity that will be served at, so, I would just caution that even if they identify an end user, it would be speculative to really identify exactly how much, frequency and capacity is there.
Okay, and then the last statement, and thank you very much for answering all these questions. The thing that scares me beyond belief is probably the mid-question. Is this lease assignable? And the answer I got, you said, I believe was correct. It is assignable, correct?
I did not answer that question. If you expected at this time, I don't have a lease in front of me. I would seek my counsel with any lease, and again, the PDA board would approve that lease, so.
That's the one thing I think the town should be aware of, is that if it is assignable, then it's an open-ended risk. But thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here today to explain this. Appreciate it. I'm Marlon Frank. I live at 264 Little Bay Road in Newington. And just had a couple of questions to kind of follow up on comments that Malcolm and others have made. But you mentioned earlier stage 4 aircraft. My understanding from what I just read, just passed out over here on the side, was that the applicant is saying that anything that was brought in would in fact be stage 4 aircraft. Do you know that to be the case?
I do not at this time. I haven't proposed any use by the developer. I do know that they have pronounced to myself and to the PDA board in the public meeting that their intent is to work with only stage 4 aircraft operators.
Okay, and do you know would that be the intent of the PDA to require that anything that was brought in was in fact stage 4?
We would like to see that. FAA policy would not allow me as the airport sponsor to commit to something like that. But what I can tell you from industry insight, if there's any value to my opinion, we currently don't have enough pilots to fly the nation's fleet. We have airlines that are literally parking planes because they do not have pilots. I will tell you that there's not an aircraft operator in the United States that's flying outdated aircraft, not solely because of noise, but more because of fuel efficiency. The country's fleet is currently operating majority-wide on stage 4 with some remaining stage 3 out there, but it's highly unlikely that anyone operating an aircraft coming into Portsmouth for commerce will be operating anything other than stage 4.
Based on the weight capacity of what these different aircraft could carry, would there necessarily be any modification to the flight paths, holding patterns, or anything of that nature?
It would be speculative for me to say, but I think it would mirror the KC-46 New Hampshire Air National Guard fleet that has a tremendous payload as well.
Okay. You mentioned the 150-170, or maybe Malcolm did. You know, does that include the A2 study, aircraft installation compatible use zone study that was done by the Air Force back in the 1980s?
I'm not sure. I doubt it's usually FAA specific, more commercial air traffic specific. It's funded to support the commercial entity of the airport, so I would doubt it, but I would have to check on that.
That picked up more than just aircraft noise, it also picked up potential for aircraft accidents, you know that criteria.
And the noise contours, remember, that's the big.
You mentioned that the applicant was gonna do traffic studies. You're talking about automotive traffic studies or aircraft?
We're asking for both.
Okay. And is that based on their proposal or based on what the existing conditions are?
So it will look at the existing for surface transportation, it will look at the existing. It will also factor in proposed based on similar facilities that they end up identifying as potentially the end use. And they will also take that and try to do that from an aviation perspective with, if they identify an end use that they can pair it to with something else in the industry that forecast the future may look like.
Clearly, Newington, as well as I'm sure the surrounding towns, are sensitive to the noise signature that can come off of Pease, especially with new aircraft that we're not familiar with uses that we're not clear on. So I would assume the local communities are gonna have a chance to respond to this and provide input to the PDA as part of regional impacts.
Absolutely, every part of this process will be in a public format. PDA will have public meetings, both airport and board of directors meetings, where there will be always public comment. And absolutely, we will commit to that, and so be completely transparent and allow the public process.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sensitive to that because I've been involved in that process for many years in prior life, so that's a key element to ensure you have buy-in is to have the input from the local communities. And I just have one more question. When would input be provided or directed to the applicant regarding hours of operation, flight times, number of flights per hour or day, that type of thing?
We would anticipate that any proposal, from a conceptual standpoint, in the next step, we have some of those details that would allow the PD board to make a conscious decision.
And does the Peace Development Authority or the facility have adequate infrastructure in place now for what the proposal might bring forward in terms of needs for fire protection, police protection, that type of thing?
We do feel that our aircraft firefighting is acceptable. We do have the KC-46, which is a high, obviously, has a little bit of a higher fire index because of the mission that they operate. So we're fine, we feel we're fine there. Our municipal service agreement with the city of Portsmouth allows for public safety. We operate at what we call an FAA Part 139 certificated airport that requires that, basically for the fleet model that you would see with the potential development now. Again, we have this activity happening now with wide body aircraft. We get served daily by whether it's troop flight or transient cargo activity is happening now. We support that with our infrastructure now.
All right, thanks very much.
Any other questions? This is the first of many we'll probably have.
You have a hand up.
Oh, excuse me.
I live right at the north end of the runway, so I'm with Peggy. You seem like a very knowledgeable and nice man, but nothing you have said has filled me with any confidence. I certainly hope that when these proposals come forth, that you're much more forceful in what you want to see, what you can prevent, and what you can force the developers to do. Because today's presentation is very passive. So the first thing I'd like to say, from our perspective, is Newington absolutely would want to see another Part 150, 161 study. And the reason is, you've got developers that get a foothold in here, and well, we don't need to do it now. Well, then they expand, well, we don't need to do it then. And then pretty soon in the future, you develop a big air cargo facility, and the real noise ramifications of that have never been addressed. So I think the Part 150 or 161 study has to look at the current proposal, but what are the expansion aspects of that proposal, and what would that mean? So one question on that regard, I know in the paper they've talked about the developer having to address PFAS contamination. They're presumably going to be digging up part of the North Apron that is highly contaminated, and you have the landfill right next to that. Is that landfill a parcel that can be expanded into?
So I'll back up in, again, my presentation to you is limited today because I simply have an option for this entity to do due diligence on a potential development. I do not have a lot view as far as end use, and I can't identify what the end use will look like. What I can tell you is that it will be a process. Our existing 161 program with the 150 study actually forecasted out a growth for commercial operations at Portsmouth. And specific to that size fleet that we may see, we'll call it a wide body fleet, there was a 2.5, I think at this point we were supposed to be at 2.5 more wide body aircraft a day than we see right now. So the existing study did look out into the future to see where we would be at cargo. Again, from what I have with this development team, I can't tell you what it's going to look like. That process will evolve, and I hope that we can give you something, or give the PDA board something that's very formidable in the near future. I can't answer that.
I'm just trying to give you feedback today of what we can see the likely progression of that process ending up to.
Certainly. So to answer your specific questions on some of the development issues is, we currently have land use controls and development permitting programs that deal with our soils management. We know the contamination that's here. Actually, if part of this project goes through, there'll be an environmental story that's a benefit, that some of these outdated Air Force buildings will be reclaimed and remediated and become more efficient, environmentally friendly buildings. But that said, specifically, no, this will not impact the landfill site that is beyond the North 40. The North 40 apron was only dealing with the existing concrete slab. Setbacks will not allow us to go off of that slab into any of the existing non-developed land in that area. And in the midfield hangar 227 area, we will not go off the existing Air Force original concrete. We'd be rehabilitating that outdated, very large hangar complex.
So what I'm hearing is no development will occur on top of the landfill, the adjacent landfill.
Oh, absolutely not.
The next thing I wanted to bring up, getting back to the noise issue, when the KC-46 planes proposals were coming in, and we went through exactly the same thing that's being set out now. Newington had a lot to say about the noise issues from those planes. Now, the biggest noise issue is not when they fly overhead. The biggest noise occurs when they sit on the runway, either waiting to take off, which they're not supposed to do, or they're taxiing to the runway, or worse yet, when they're doing maintenance, where they can run those engines all the way up to maximum power for half an hour, run them down, and run them all the way back up to maximum power. And sometimes that goes on for 2 hours in the middle of the night. So the comments that we get back about this voluntary noise program don't mean much. I mean, it's just blah, 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 yeah, we have this in place. But the reality of it is that the way it works with an aircraft, it doesn't help. And so that would be another reason for really underscoring Newington's desire to have this looked at again in terms of how the development might go over time, rather than just this one 200,000 square foot building at the end of the North Runway.
I guess I'll add to my original answer to you, or the one that you picked out. In my opinion, this proposal would not trigger an FAA-funded 150 study. It wouldn't figure federal funding to support it, due to the fact that we probably won't just have the end use that would trigger that. That said, I think PDA board members and staff would have an interest in identifying what potentially a study would look like, and that's potentially a condition that we look at.
So again, that would be a strong recommendation from our point of view, that it not just be your opinion, but it should be something that the PDA board addresses and votes on. Another thing that was
And,
brought up.
and you will see, data that will be provided as part of the entity doing the due diligence, and that would be either, referenced or cross-examined by the PDA or put out for an opine, but yeah, you would see something similar to, an FAA study, although we're not a funded one, but, potentially invested by the developer or the PDA.
So one of the things that came up when the KC 46 claims came in, and they went through that same process. Here's the proposal, here's the environmental impact, here's the noise impact, here's the traffic impact. Guess what? We're going to do it anyway. One of the things that Newington requested was that right now, a lot of the noise or the maintenance on engines is done right out on the tarmac. And there have been no berms or enclosures to try to mitigate the noise that goes out in every direction from planes running maintenance in the middle of the night with their engines running full tilt. So I know there's proposals here for warehouses. Is there any proposal for an area where those planes can go so that the noise is mitigated when any maintenance or work is being done?
Yeah, so I can speak to the commercial side of the airport, that we do have a ground run enclosure, that we require any commercial aircraft at Portsmouth that's doing the maintenance run to use the ground run enclosure. It is a little bit dated and it won't support, extreme wide body aircraft, but we do not have a maintenance facility currently that supports anything larger than, our current Allegiant, aircraft. And we do utilize, and the airport has the authority to direct commercial entities to use that ground run enclosure. It's a standard operating executive director directive that we put out to our end users to use that. As far as berming, I know that historically we've done significant berming along Delta Taxiway on the Newington property line in the past. And quite frankly, I think berming is a great initiative, and the airport would always be open-minded to look at berming. In fact, it solves a lot of problems for us with soils management and different things when we need to move soil around. So we would be absolutely interested in looking at berming, and I do meet with the guard on a regular basis, and I can relay your thoughts on ground run procedures that are happening now and identify those as well.
So a very strong recommendation, again, from my perspective on the meeting today, is if you don't have a noise abatement facility now for the large wide-body planes that we think will be coming, that should be a recommendation that be put in place. And whatever the existing berms are, that should be another recommendation that something be done for the noise, because no matter what anyone says, more planes at night will bring more noise. And there's just, I mean, it's common sense.
Again, speculative at night, we just don't know if that's the case, and we don't know if there'll be maintenance performed on these aircraft. We just don't know. It's speculative, and it's probably, in my opinion, it's unlikely that this would be an at-night operation.
How often does the Air National Guard do maintenance at night on their planes?
I could get you that answer, but I don't have that off the top of my head. That's an easy request.
It is an easy answer, because that would give us an idea of bringing X number of more planes.
No, it wouldn't be relative, because those planes, the Air Guard planes are based at Portsmouth. I think it's highly unlikely that we would have based cargo planes at Pease.
One of the developers was talking about a maintenance facility where they could take existing aircraft and turn them into cargo aircraft. Is that still?
That developer does not have anything formal in front of the PDA board.
But again, that might be engine maintenance as well.
Any other questions?
Ann Highland, Hebert, 20 Underwood Landing. Mr. Breen, you have referenced a development partner. As we move forward.
I don't think I used, I may have used partner, I apologize. We have a developer, it's not a partner.
A developer.
Pease Development Authority, we have a developer.
Developer. as we move forward, if new information presents itself, is that a hard and fast decision? Or in fact, with new information, the project changing going forward, is there a possibility that the developer could also change that would better suit the project in completion?
So I think there's two parts to that. First, my staff works with multiple development teams for all types of development. In this case, my staff is working with a development team between Procon Construction and Kane Properties that have the two option agreements. They're in constant dialogue as they go through the design process. Anything that comes out of that of substantial nature goes in front of the PDA board. What I read, the first part that I read today is a status report on the project, on the proposed development to my board that I'll be repeating on Thursday of this week. We will have an update like that in every PDA board most likely, but anything of substance, if an end user is identified, if they're getting to a conceptual point that they have a site design, a building design, that will be put in front of the PDA board in a public meeting, allowed for public comment. This will not be a quickly decided, there will not be a quick decision here. Everything will be put out in a process, much like we do with all of our development at Pease. Normally, we go a conceptual presentation, and then we start to go into a 90-degree design, technical review. Then we discuss a lease agreement, and each step is approved by the PDA Board of Directors. In this case, we started a little bit earlier because we thought that this was going to be concerning to the community. And we had entered an option to start the public process immediately. And try to get as much of this into a public process prior to any real action before the PDA board as far as a next step in the development or a next step in the lease negotiations.
I think what I'm asking you is if there were major breakdowns with the choice of Procon and Kane as the developer going forward, for the betterment of the community, for a better project, is there a possibility of changing the developer?
Oh, absolutely.
If
This
it
is
would
only
need
an
be.
option agreement. We actually have a right of entry on the same North 40 parcel with another entity that is going through geo survey. The option expires in 6 months with this development team. There are some options in there that would need to be approved by the PDA board to extend it for 6-month durations up to 18 months. But yes, this could not come to fruition. We could have another entity that is, that after this option period comes and has a development proposal before us, but absolutely this could change. I will say, there is again, my opinion, there is a benefit that there is a local component to this development proposal, as opposed to some national large-scale aircraft operators that go to airports and propose things. We are in a very good position, I think, that we have a local entity that has ties to the community, and truly, I believe there was an op-ed in the paper today that truly puts out that they want to make sure that anything going forward is the right fit for Portsmouth Airport. And that's not the case all the time when other entities come to town and want to do business at your airport.
Thank you.
Last question, Sweeney.
Just one follow-up on more of a clarification. I know you like the words "in your opinion." This one, I think, doesn't fall within your opinion. I think this is actually an engineering question. You mentioned berming. You like the concept of berming and the sound reduction. Well, berming is the same difference as a sound barrier. Sound travels, hits the barrier, goes up in the air, and then comes down about 3 houses, lots over. So if you are directly behind that berm or sound barrier, it's wonderful. You'll see you got a 50% sound reduction. If you are across the street and the home and the sound barrier, you have triple the sound. I've lived it because I just described where I came from. We abutted 495 and a sound barrier. They put one in. Our sound went down by half. My neighbor across the street, they had a sound gauge, went up by 3 times. So if you're telling us as a town of Newington and Greenland and anyone else that's here, that berming is your sense of sound reduction, it's not a sound reduction, it's actually a sound amplification if you do berming. And we're then affected as a town or any of the neighboring towns as a base, that's an amplification, not a reduction. And if I'm wrong, please
Well, I'll
correct me.
just clarify that I was asked if we would consider berming, and I said that we're proponents of berming. I don't have the engineering information for me, but the last thing we would want to do is create more noise to anyone. So if berming did not make sense, it doesn't make sense. But that was asked of me, and would we consider berming?
Thank you very
Absolutely
much.
would consider berming.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, for coming and agreeing. The town of Newington is an open door for us. We're very, gives us all the information and welcomes us. And we send, some of us attend some of the DBA meetings to get firsthand. Our 2 representatives, Susan Parker and Peggy Lanson, keep us informed. Peggy always brings the agenda and minutes of all the meetings to the office here for us to go over. And I want to thank you all for coming here and appreciate it. And we will have an open door here. As things develop, we will have other public meetings to keep us all informed. And that's what the Board of Selectmen have agreed to, that we will keep the residents informed as best we can and as often as we have. Thank you. Thank you all